What's up guys, my name is Ace, and today we're going to be talking all about Omni-Movement in Call of Duty, partially because of a recent leak from the Ghost of Hope, but also I was actually putting this video together before this leak even came out, and it was just going to be talking about Omni-Movement in general for the franchise going forward, but this leak really pushed me to get this out sooner than I expected. According to the Ghost of Hope, COD 2026, so not the upcoming Call of Duty game, but the one after that, which is rumored to be Modern Warfare 4, an Infinity Ward Call of Duty game. At the moment, it currently doesn't have Omni-Movement in it like we see in Black Ops 6. Now, of course, they're still quite early on. At this stage, big things can still be changing with the game, so this isn't confirmation that Omni-Movement won't be in the game when it comes to 2026. But with this, it does bring up the big question, should Omni-Movement become a staple in the Call of Duty franchise, or should we be going back to more traditional Call of Duty movement? And reading through a lot of the responses to this leak, it seems to be a very polarized topic. I'm seeing just as much support for people against Omni-Movement as I am for people in favor of Omni-Movement for Call of Duty. And I find it fairly rare that you see this much of a split in the community. Usually a consensus forms pretty quickly, or at least a clear majority on one side or the other. That doesn't appear to be the case this time around. So today, I just wanted to share my 2 cents on this topic. Should they keep Omni-Movement around, or should they scrap it and return to more traditional movement? And just to lay out my bias right away here, I generally like playing Call of Duty quite aggressively. I like using these movement options. I was a big fan of advanced movement back in the day as well. So I'm somebody that takes advantage of Omni-Movement, and I enjoy it a lot on a personal level. However, at least in the state that it's in Black Ops 6, I don't think it's healthy for the franchise long term. And I'm actually fine with it just being something that was unique to Black Ops 6 that separated it from other Call of Duty games and provided a nice change of pace away from the standard formula for movement. I guess I should also point out, current leaks are suggesting that the upcoming Call of Duty game, Black Ops 7 or whatever it's going to be, will also have Omni-Movement, and on top of Omni-Movement, they will be adding wall running apparently too. So with this topic, we're primarily talking about after the next Call of Duty game, rather than at the end of Black Ops 6's life cycle. In either case, you might be wondering why I would say that I like Omni-Movement, but I don't think it should be in the game going forward, at least in this state. And it's basically the same way that I feel about advanced movement in Call of Duty, with jetpacks for instance. Even though I like it on a personal level, I think it's something that's too polarizing and pushes too many people in the community away from the game. And we gotta remember what Call of Duty is. It's the McDonald's of FPS games. It's meant to be extremely accessible and appeal a little bit to everybody. So when you have a core element of the game, like the movement system for instance, in a state where it's so polarizing, where you have roughly half the community pushing back against it, while the other half enjoys it, that means it's probably not the thing that should be used going forward for a very generalist franchise like Call of Duty. Now, in saying that, you might notice I keep specifying, at least in the state that it's in Black Ops 6, I think we could potentially find a nice middle ground with Omni-Movement where they take elements of it, or maybe they just tone back how it works in certain areas to find more of a middle ground between current Omni-Movement and traditional Call of Duty movement. And then perhaps we could get a little bit of the best of both worlds when it comes to the system. Now, when it comes to these adjustments, I think we have to go into the individual aspects of Omni-Movement since it is comprised of various different elements. Like Omni-Sprint, for instance. This is the ability to sprint in any direction. That is a big part of Omni-Movement. And I do enjoy this. I find it nice to be able to maintain forward momentum while checking to my left or to my right. I can continue sprinting in a straight direction while turning my body over, checking a corner, and then turning back. Whereas in previous COD games, if you wanted to check that corner, you're going to end up losing some momentum because you can't continue sprinting sideways as you're looking to your side. So with Omni-Sprint, this allows you to traverse the map a lot faster and more effectively. You don't have to stop and lose momentum nearly as often. You can just keep going. And while that feels nice and smooth and fluid, at the same time, there's the argument, should you be able to do this? And does this create pacing issues with the game if you can constantly be maintaining this sprint level momentum everywhere you go? And in my eyes, this is where map design comes into the equation. I think the general map design in Black Ops 6 doesn't accommodate for this very well. In fact, we've got more cramped maps than we would typically find. Whereas with a movement system like this, you would think they'd have to open things up a little bit and spread things out a little more in order to get that pacing just right. Additionally, with Omni-Sprint, one of the issues that many people have with it is how quickly you can change directions. Like if you want to sprint to the left and then suddenly change directions and immediately start sprinting to the right, while in first person, it feels very snappy and responsive, as it should with Call of Duty. You want things to feel very responsive. That's one of the defining features of Call of Duty. In order to make that feel responsive from first person, it's going to end up looking extremely fast and jarring and unnatural as well from an enemy's perspective, for instance, when they're trying to track you and predict your movements. So finding that balance not only with the map design, but also with how momentum is handled and how quickly you're able to change directions, I think it introduces some issues that can potentially be balanced, but it's tricky to find that perfect balance and adjust to that. And therefore, perhaps it's best to just get rid of this altogether and go back to the basics where you just don't have to deal with these issues that arise. As for the next element of Omni-Movement, and probably the most polarizing aspect of it, this is the Omni-Slide, or the ability to slide in any direction. And that obviously goes somewhat hand in hand with the Omni-Sprint, since you need to be sprinting before you can initiate a slide. In its current state with Black Ops 6, I think this is one of the most polarizing elements of the game that has absolutely pushed away portions of the community. Now, like I said, just a reminder, I like using Omni-Movement. I take advantage of Omni-Slide much more than others use it against me, so I like it, I benefit from it. But in the state that it's currently in Black Ops 6, I think this is the area where I think the pushback against it is very valid. It's something that has pretty much taken over the game, especially when you get into the higher skilled lobbies. People are sliding all over the place because it's quite simply the most effective method of aggressively challenging people in this game. And that's because in its current state, your slide is very fast, and more importantly, I would say you can slide for very long distances or durations. And this is even after the little nerfs that the sliding got with the Season 3 updates. Now, when it comes to Black Ops 6, I feel like this has become a defining element with the game, so I'm absolutely not pushing for them to make any adjustments to this in this current game. But again, looking forward in the Call of Duty franchise and looking at whether or not Omni-Movement should stay, I think if Omni-Slide does return, it should probably be toned back quite a bit compared to what we're seeing in Black Ops 6. And I think a very reasonable adjustment that just makes sense in my eyes at least is to tone back the slide speed and distances or durations with sideways or backwards sliding while maintaining a decent level of slide if you're sliding in a forward direction. So if you're sprinting forward and you activate a slide, that should still be a decent slide. I'd probably still tone it back a little bit compared to what we're seeing in Black Ops 6 right now, especially after going back and playing some Modern Warfare 3. That's one thing I noticed immediately is just how extreme the slide is in Black Ops 6 compared to the previous game. So I toned that back a little bit, but primarily, if Omni-Movement were here to stay, I would like to see them tone down the sideways or backwards sliding a bit, just that speed and duration, make it less effective than sliding forward. So you still have that option to do it, but if you really want to maintain a lot of momentum in a slide, you've got to be sprinting forward to make that happen. Now again, perhaps the better solution is just to scrap it entirely and only allow you to slide forwards like we've been able to do in previous Call of Duty games. I'm just saying, if they do decide to keep it around, I think it would make sense to tone back those areas a little bit to make this less polarizing than it currently is. Now, after that, we also have Omni-Dive, or the ability to dive in any direction. And for me, I find this to be a fun and flashy thing to do. It's generally not super effective, unlike the sliding situation, so it's not something you're seeing all the time. It doesn't like take over the game to the same level that slides have. So I personally like the Omni-Dive just for those fun show-off sort of moments when you're bored and just want to try something cool. But at the same time, would I miss it if it were gone? Probably not a whole lot. I use it from time to time. It's kind of fun and interesting. But if we didn't have the ability to dive in any direction, I really don't think I'd miss it all that much. And then finally, one last element that arguably is part of Omni-Movement, you could also just call it a separate feature as well. This is the Supine Prone system, where if you're prone on your belly and you want to turn around and do a 180, instead of rotating in place on your belly like we have in every other Call of Duty game, now as you turn around, your character will actually roll onto his side and then back. And I personally like this, despite the fact that it comes with one key issue, and this is a visibility issue. Over the years, I think we've really gotten used to detecting when somebody is prone because they have the exact same stance. No matter what, a prone player looks a certain way every single time. Whereas now with Supine Prone, there are a bunch of different variations of what a prone player can look like on the ground. And as a result, especially early on, I found that I often wasn't at least immediately recognizing that that was an alive player. And I would often just assume it was a dead body because prone players don't look like that in Call of Duty normally. Now, this is something that still gets me from time to time. There's still the odd situation where somebody's laying on their back and I swear it was a dead body. But I also feel like I've adapted to this quite a bit, and this is happening less and less often. And overall, as a mechanic, I do see this as a clear step forward, largely because it not only feels really good in a first-person perspective, but also because it looks natural. It looks like what you would actually expect to happen if somebody was laying on their stomach and they wanted to quickly turn around and shoot at somebody that's behind them. So for me, I actually want the Supine Prone mechanic to return. I'd like this to become a staple of Call of Duty, despite the fact that there is that visibility issue, but that's something that can be adapted to. And I think if they were to keep this mechanic around for a few years, it would become a non-issue and people would look back on the old style of Prone and laugh. But there we go. That wraps it up for all of the elements of Omni-Movement. I think overall, if in COD 2026 they decide to scrap Omni movement and just go with that traditional movement, I'd be totally fine with that as long as the movement itself is still fast and fluid and snappy. I don't want to see a Modern Warfare 2 situation again where the only really good viable tactic for challenging somebody aggressively around a corner, for instance, was jump shotting. I really don't like what they did with the slide and the movement in that game at all, but looking back to Modern Warfare 3, for instance, that movement felt great in my eyes. It was fast, fluid, snappy, but not totally overkill in the sense that the map looked like a slip and slide with people just sliding all over the place. Yeah, you saw people sliding quite a bit, but not nearly to the extent that we're seeing in Black Ops 6. Now, in saying that, scrapping Omni movement altogether may not be the best bet, and I'd also be open to the idea of them keeping Omni movement around, but making clear adjustments to certain areas to make sure that it's not overkill like it is for many people in Black Ops 6. I do really like the level of control and freedom that Omni movement brings. And like I said, on a personal level, I like it, so I'd be happy to see it return, but I also really don't think that it's healthy for the franchise, at least in its current state, so some clear adjustments would have to be made. And then one last thing that I wanted to talk about here, since we're talking about movement, and this has come up a little bit over the years, and I want to keep pushing on this as well. I wonder if we're still going to be seeing tac sprint going forward, like for COD 2026, for instance. I've made dedicated videos on this, so I don't want to get into it in too much detail here, but in my eyes, the tactical sprint mechanic is totally unnecessary with Call of Duty. I really don't think it adds anything special to the game, since tactical sprint just becomes the new standard way to get around the map rather than something you actually use tactically, within the context of Call of Duty at least. And I do think the game plays better off without it, as long as the base sprint speed is also increased a bit to compensate for that. Just like we see with the Slipstream perk in Black Ops 6. I use it on pretty much every single one of my loadouts now because the game just feels better without tactical sprint in my eyes. And it really raises the question, why are they sticking to it? What does tactical sprint realistically add to the gameplay experience in Call of Duty multiplayer? In my eyes, nothing at all. I think it does fit with certain other games where it is actually used as a very tactical mechanic, but it just doesn't fit with Call of Duty's gameplay style. Now, of course, these are all just my opinions on movement going forward with Call of Duty, and this is where I want to hear from you guys in those comments down below. Is Omni movement something you'd like to see return in future Call of Duty games, or would you like to see them scrap it? Or perhaps you think there's a good middle ground where they could keep Omni movement, but perhaps tone it down to make it less polarizing overall? Also, what are your thoughts on tac sprint? Do you guys think that should stay, or do you think it's finally time to get rid of that? Just let me know all of those thoughts down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.